Life and you're fans of Facts of Life. I'm not going to talk about that today, but let me just answer the question. Actually, there are two questions people want to know. The first one is, do the girls and I still stay in touch? So, yes, we do still stay in touch. We're actually very good friends, and I see them at least once a year. Other than that, they want to know, what have I been doing since the Facts of Life? Well, I don't have time to go into that, but basically we filmed the last episode of the Facts of Life in March of 1988. I got married in July of 88. I got pregnant in 89, and then I had a child in 90, 91, and 92. So, obviously, Mrs. Garrett taught me the Facts of Life well. After that, I left show business to be a stay-at-home wife and mom, and had just been raising my kids mostly in Texas and outside of show business, other than Survivor. And so Survivor didn't feel like a show business thing to me. That was a very personal thing, that I loved the game and I wanted to play the game, and the fact that it was on television was just kind of like, yeah, it's on television. That was a very personal thing. So that's what I've been doing from then until now. So now I'm going to start right now, because this is a very fresh message for me. This is a part of a real recent journey that I've been on in my life. I was recently talking to my friend, my hairdresser, and you know hairdressers, we really should pay them more because they're more like therapists. And so I was talking to my hairdresser, and she was asking me to kind of catch up on what the kids are doing. So I was coming in and telling about Tucker, my son Tucker, my oldest son, who's 23, that still lives in Texas. And I just recently moved to California in January, and Tucker was out visiting me, and I'm just a Groupon fanatic. There needs to be some kind of like group for Groupon addiction. And when he was coming out, I bought this Groupon where you could be in a flight simulator. And I thought, well, that'll be a fun thing to do, because it's always hard to find things to do with boys. I mean, girls, you take them out shopping, you take them out for coffee, we talk, but boys, that's much harder. So I got this Groupon, I took him out to this flight simulator, and we both had time to be in that. Now, Tucker was a real natural. He was great at this. He was so good that after the second time through, the lady changed the computer settings so that there was a storm, and he had to, navigate the storm and everything. He just flew like a pro. I, on the other hand, I actually had to land on the 405, the simulator, because I was just not able to navigate even any kind of wind at all. I actually have a picture of that, which is I showed it to my friend, my hairdresser. I'm going to show you. This is what Tucker looks like. Can you see him? Okay. He's the one on the left. I know you can't tell because of the hair. But now I was showing this picture to my hairdresser, kind of bringing her up to date on things, and she said, "How is Tucker?" She said, how's his band going? He's in a band. And so I was telling her that the band is going really well. But I missed that part of him that when he first started in a band in junior high, he was just like, he was like Mick Jagger. I mean, he was just dancing all over the place, jumping off the drum riser, throwing the mic down, picking it up with his foot and holding it. I mean, he was just wild, and he was a great singer, but it didn't matter. He was a better performer, and he was just wild and crazy and so charismatic, and he just reminded me so much of Mick Jagger. And I was explaining that as he's gotten older, he's like brought it in, and he's gotten cooler, and now it's more a little bit like this. There's hardly anything coming out at all, and I think that's probably for their little, for their indie band, that's probably more appropriate. But I totally miss that Mick Jagger boy. And my friend Michelle, who's known me forever, she said, I miss the Mick Jagger in you, Lisa. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I've known you a long time, and there have been times I have seen Mick Jagger come out in you. She said, you just, there are just every once in a while, but it's been a long time since I've seen you just wide open, just kind of let it out, just all that's in there, abandonment. And she said, I would like to see Mick come out in you a little bit more. Well, that really struck me, because I recognized what she was saying, and I guess I had, I'd lost my inner Mick and didn't even realize it. And so she sent me a photo on my iPhone later on in that week, and she said, Lisa, I want you to make this your screensaver. And she said, I want you, that is what I see when I see you. So I want you to see yourself like that again. Well, the following weekend, I was speaking for the very last time with Women of Faith, and we weekend event. Mandisa, she was on American Idol. She's just a great singer, and she sings a song called Shackles, and just about, unbinding, your feet and just letting loose. And so at the end, everybody gets up on stage. All the singers all the speakers that have been speaking, we get up on stage, and then we're kind of supposed to dance with her. Well, I got up on stage, and of course, before this, I would just kind of dance like this, so light and so controlled and so cool. And all of a sudden, this picture, of me as Mick Jagger popped up in my brain, and I thought, I gotta do it. I'm gonna let Mick out. And so I just threw my hands up in the air and just let the music come. I was going wild, and I don't know what happened, but at one point, my feet started doing something like this, and all the blood must have rushed from my head down into my legs, and I'm like this, and all of a sudden, I'm going this way, and I'm going, and I cannot stop, and I just face plant and slide into home on stage. Well, just so happy that a friend of mine was actually filming that on her iPhone and put it on YouTube, and so I figured it's out there for all the world to see. I might as well show it to you too. So this was my Mick Jagger moment. For my life, because there is this part of me that wants to be able to just throw my hands up with abandon and just freedom and dance and don't care what anybody thinks and just let it all out. But there's this other part of me that is terrified that if I do that, I'll lose my balance. The blood will rush from my head. I will get out of my head and way into my body, and my body's going to betray me in some way, and I'm going to fall flat on my face. And it will be embarrassing, and I will feel, ashamed, and all that, just totally make a huge mistake in some way. And fear of failure is one thing. I totally have that down. But for me, that means even something more, because to me, failure means just disconnection. At that point, people are not going to like me. They're going to judge me. They're going to point and laugh, and they're going to say, "See, she said she was one way, but look, she's fallen flat. She's just flat on her face." And so I don't do that. I don't live out like that, because it's so much safer to just kind of be in control, to be cool, to not kind of go so far that if you fall, you're not going to fall very far. And this has been really just a life pattern for me. When I was a little girl, actually it's why I got into acting in the first place, was because of this part of me that was so afraid of making a mistake. Because if I made a mistake, it meant disconnection. It meant, because doing something wrong was the worst thing in the world. Not being perfect, but perfect was how I got love and acceptance and affirmation. And so it was so terrifying for me that I just got smaller and smaller and smaller until I tried to be almost invisible, and to the point where I was just like bound by fear, and it really manifested itself with just extreme shyness. Well, in second grade, I had a wonderful second grade teacher who saw me. And she had a parent-teacher meeting with my mom, and she said, I'm really concerned about Lisa, because when it's time for recess, all the other kids, go out and play, and she would rather stay in and help me, which is wonderful. I would love that, but I don't think that's the healthiest thing for her. And if she does, if I force her out onto the playground, then she will just get a book and read under a tree. And she said, I want you to be aware of it in some way that you can kind of just help her come out of herself a little bit more. I think it would just be better for her. Well, my mom mom went into mom mode, you know what that is, and to fix this, and so she signed me up for a bunch of classes, and one of the classes she signed me up for was an acting class. And I took this acting class, and something inside of me felt the freedom to come out, because I was behind a role, or I was behind a mask, or I was on the stage, so, especially if the lights are on, it's dark, you can't see the people. But it was perfect. It was the perfect scenario for me to be able to kind of come out a little bit, a little bit more dangerously, because anything I did behind a role or on the stage, it wouldn't be considered a mistake, because it wasn't really me. It was somebody else. And so this was actually how I got into acting. I write more about it in my autobiography, but all that to say that this was something that has been going on for a long time in my life, and I have, after coming to know the love of the Lord, there have been definitely layers and dimensions of healing. I'm not so paralyzingly shy anymore. But as most things in life, we've got one or two things that we deal with our whole life, and this is one of them. And it reared its ugly head again, this time on national television on Survivor. Because Survivor is a very primitive, primal setting, and so those deepest things that are in your toes that you've either repressed or thought you've dealt with, they're just coming out there, and so happy that millions could witness my journey of dealing with this again. Actually, I brought a clip where it was rearing its ugliest of heads. This is just the second episode into Survivor. I brought this clip. I became a Christian when I was 10 years old, and I wasn't raised in a church going home, and I don't have a really dramatic testimony. Actually, a girlfriend was spending the night with me on a Saturday night. We got to talking about how fun it would be to get dressed up and go somewhere. There's not a whole lot of places 10-year-olds can go on their own, and so I said, well, I know what, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't we go down to that little church at the end of the street on the corner? And she said, I love that. So the next morning we were so excited. We got dressed up, put our dresses on, hopped on our bicycles, rode down the street to this little church. And I walked into that Sunday school class that morning, and I discovered something that literally changed my life. I discovered that they were serving donuts and orange juice down there every Sunday morning. I live in this house, and I did not know this. So the next Sunday morning, forget about the dress. I'm going out there for some more donuts and orange juice. And I kept going back. Now, eventually, it was for more than the donuts and orange juice. But I didn't know what it was. I couldn't have put these words to it at the time. I just knew that every time I walked into those church doors, it felt like my heart had found its home. And my Sunday school teacher told me that what I was feeling was the love of Jesus, and that I could ask Jesus to come into my heart, and I could take that love home with me. And I said, well, I want that. And so I prayed, and I asked Jesus to come into my heart. And at that moment, it was so settled. I knew this was what my life was about. And not only that, but I had no idea what a perfect fit this was for me, until they gave me this little envelope to take home, and it had a place for me to put my coins in, and then I could check off whether I brought an offering, whether I read my Bible every day, whether I brought a friend, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is perfect. It even comes with like a checklist about how to be a perfect Christian. I don't have to worry. I know what to do. I can do this. I can follow these little rules, so that I know I don't make a mistake and I don't mess this thing up, and so that I don't have this separation from this love that feels so good. So I'm telling you, and I'm so grateful for this little checklist, because at 10 I started reading my Bible every night and excited to give my offering, and I wanted to bring as many people to church, and then I began, as I was reading my Bible every night, I discovered there was more than just the top 10, the 10 commandment rules. I mean, there were like hundreds of rules in there. And this was thrilling for me, because the hundreds of rules meant there was a wonderful boundary all around me to make sure that I didn't mess up, to make sure that I stayed safe within these boundaries and wouldn't experience that kind of disconnection by falling and making a mistake and not being perfect. And so I really began, I'm so grateful for that, by the way. I'm so grateful for those walls. I'm so grateful for those boundaries, because 2 years later, I did move to California by myself. I had guardians, and my grandmother came occasionally. My mom came when she could. But for all intents and purposes, God was a very practical parent to me. My autobiography is entitled Facts of Life and Other Lessons My Father Taught Me. And I'm talking about my Heavenly Father because He really was the grounding for my life. And so these rules did keep me safe. They did protect me. They did keep me from falling in ways that would have been incredibly painful and harmful. And life could be, in a lot of ways, life or death. I'm all for rules. I'm all for boundaries. I've written a parenting book about walls and boundaries for kids. And there are even research that talks about how you put a kid out on a playground, and if there's no boundaries around, they'll all huddle together and they won't play much. But if you put a boundary around them, then they feel safe and feel free to play. So the safety of these walls growing up, I was so grateful. But just like with parenting kids, it's the same thing with us. The law really was designed for children. I'm all for the law when my kids are little, but if you try to keep putting the law on kids once they begin to become their own people as far as adolescents and are able to then walk out what you taught them, if you keep putting that on it, they will totally rebel and then fall even further. The same with as believers. The Bible says let me find it here. What is that? It says in Galatians 3:23, before faith came, we were kept under guard by the law. Now, guard is a good thing, but it also kind of sounds like a prison, and it can be if we are kept under guard by the law too long. Kept for the faith which would afterward be revealed. Therefore, the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ, that we might be ultimately justified by faith. But after faith has come, we are no longer under the tutor. You see, one of the things that I've learned is that following the law does not bring us to Christ. Failing the law is what brings us to Christ. That the law is actually kind of this elaborate, sneaky trap. Because nobody can live up to the law. We are all going to get caught in the law and we are going to fall. But here's the cool thing. In this trap, this is a trap door. There's a trap door, and when we fall through that trap door, we fall into grace. That's when we fall into Christ, into the hands of Christ. You know, the time the Lord was trying to teach me about grace, and I've known about grace since I was, a little bit, 10 years old. I've known about grace, but there's such a difference in knowing about grace and actually knowing grace. Knowing the love of God and then knowing the love of God that passes understanding, they're totally, totally different things. And I was beginning to feel that the Lord really wanted me to have grace to go from my head down into my heart and into my body. And that freaked me out. And I remember saying to God, I really do want to know about grace. I just don't want to need grace. Because if I need grace, that means I fell. That means I messed up. And that means that I know it doesn't mean this, but I felt it. You won't love me anymore. I will be rejected. I will mess up. People won't like me anymore. It was terrifying, the thought of needing grace. I was very excited because I've been listening to this Franciscan priest. And he was telling a story that I had never thought of before. And man, it blew my mind. He was talking about when Jesus is, right before he goes to be crucified, he's with his very best friends around the table. And he says specifically to Peter. He says, Peter, and the Lord said, Simon, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. And he pointed out that Jesus did not say, Simon, Satan has got set up a trap for you. He's got it planned. I know when it's going to happen. It's going to happen before the rooster crows in the morning. It's an elaborate trap. He said, but we're going to outsmart. He didn't say we're going to outsmart Satan. Here's all you have to do. Between now and then, you go into your room, lock the door, do not come out no matter what. Maybe even have like an accountability partner on the outside of the door. So if you're tempted to come out the door, they will make sure that you don't, and they will remind you that Satan has it out for you, and you need to stay safe so that you don't fall. He didn't say that. He said, I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. He didn't say that you should not fail, but that your faith should not fail. And when you return to me, strengthen your brethren. You see, until we have fallen and actually experienced grace, we can talk all day long about faith to other people and about Christ. And there may be some limited kind of connection, but we don't connect to people in our perfection. We connect to people in our imperfection. They don't open to us when we don't have it all together. They open to us when they realize that we are just like them and we don't have it all together. The thing about grace that I've learned, though, is that it's given to us freely, but we have to choose to receive it. And just over a year ago, I had probably my toughest encounter with choosing to receive grace. My husband and I had been married for 23 years, and a year ago, March, we got a divorce. And that just was, for me, one of the ultimate failures. It felt like I was letting my children down, my family down, the Christian community down, people who had followed me, who knew I was a believer, and it was just this, of course, another failure, as somebody who says they believe, and it felt awful. I felt horrible. And yet it was right as the Lord was teaching me about grace, and I knew I had to receive that grace. And I had to walk in that grace. And it felt like cheap grace. It felt like I needed to, well, maybe I'll do that down the road, but right now I need to suffer. I need to feel how bad this is. I can't just be walking in grace and let it go, because this is a big deal, divorce, for what it calls to my family and my reputation and so much. And so it's like I was putting off receiving grace until there was enough time that I proved how badly I felt about it. And the thought came to my mind that if I were to die, I know my children would grieve my being away, but I would not want them to spend any day longer than was necessary for them to grieve that loss. If I were able to see them and their grieving would not make me feel good. Oh, good. Okay, they really did love me. Okay, they're proving how much they love me. The very first time they laughed out loud from their belly and they realized, oh my goodness, I haven't laughed in months. I would be laughing with them. I would be so excited. I would be setting up things for them somehow to laugh some more. And I realized that is really how my Father God was not wanting me to prove how terrible I felt about it. He was just waiting for me to receive that grace and walk in it. Maybe even dance in it. And then I realized I did not only have to then receive the grace, but I had to choose to give the grace. You know, that was exactly what Peter was instructed to do, was to then give the grace. And I had an opportunity right there to do that in giving grace to my ex-husband. We were divorced in March 1st. March 10th, I was on a plane to the Philippines to do survival. I do not recommend this, by the way. But we hadn't told anybody about our divorce except our family. I mean, it was nobody's business. We didn't send out a press release. It's not like I was hiding anything. It was not like I didn't want people to know. It was just nobody's business. Right before Survivor aired in September, the National Enquirer got wind of the divorce. And so they put out this article about how I was hiding, we had secretly divorced, and I was, ashamed of this, and because of my Christian testimony, and because they didn't know why we divorced, they just had to make it up, because, somebody has to be the blame. Somebody's got to take the judgment and the punishment for it, and they didn't know anything about my ex-husband, so they just made up this whole story about me and how domineering I am, and how I made fun of my husband on the blog, and he for years just tried to get me to, be kind, and I was mean, and all this stuff, and I'm reading it. And first of all, I'm just outraged on every level, that we weren't trying to hide this. It's just a private thing. And wait a minute, there's always two sides to the story. It's not all my fault. Let me tell you what he did. Let me tell you why he's to blame. Because by nature, we really are just programmed to not, God doesn't want us, we don't want to carry that guilt, that shame. We don't want to carry it, and so we offload it on somebody else. We put it over there because it's too heavy. It's suffocating. We just, project it and put it on somebody else and point the finger to somebody else. And so that was my tendency. Well, wait a minute. What about him? National Enquirer needed a scapegoat, so they picked me. I didn't want it. I needed a scapegoat. I'm going to point fingers to him. What's interesting is that we get the term scapegoat. It's such a common, use in our world today. We get it from the Bible. Originally in the Old Testament, the children of Israel once a year would gather together, and the high priest would take the collective sins of all of the children of Israel and offload them and dump them onto this goat with the blood, and then send it off so it would escape out into the wilderness and take away that sin. And then in the New Testament, we are pointed directly to that scapegoat. That Jesus is the illustration, the incarnate scapegoat, where our sins are put upon him. And he does take our sins into himself, and they are offloaded, and we don't carry them anymore. But what I wanted to receive grace, but I wanted my ex-husband under the law. And the Lord made it clear that you really can't kind of dance in both sides. Because the law, the letter of the law kills, but the Spirit gives life. The Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And if I wanted freedom, I not only had to receive the grace, but if I wanted freedom, it was equally important that I give the grace. That I get out from under the law and forgive as well. That freedom was a choice. It came from giving, the choice to give and to receive and give away grace. What's so sad though is that I wasn't experiencing grace in the church at that point at all. As soon as my divorce came public, churches were calling and canceling my speaking, and except for one church. One church, I love this. The women's director was ready to cancel my speaking, and they talked to the pastor and explained why. And the pastor said, wait a minute, what are you doing? What kind of message are we going to send to the congregation that is probably half divorced about the grace of God if you cut her off and say she's not welcome here? Don't you dare cut her off. If we're going to speak grace, we're going to give grace and extend it. I was reading I'm on Twitter, and I follow a guy named Donald Miller, and he says, if you feel the need to hide your sin, you're in a religious community. Find a church that follows Christ for real. From my understanding, this is a church like that. This is a place you are free to fall. This is a place where you are free to dance wildly and perhaps fall flat on your face and receive the grace. Not to crawl back into your little, safe space that feels safe, but is suffocating. Interestingly, I experienced grace more than maybe at that point I'd ever really experienced it on Survivor. I don't know if you follow the show, if you remember, there was a time where I found Malcolm's hidden immunity idol, and I promised him that I wouldn't tell anybody, and I didn't tell anybody for many days until it was actually advantageous for me to tell somebody. So so that I could get then blindside him and get him voted off. And so then I told somebody that my wonderful plan came out in the open. I got caught. He found out. And I thought for sure they were going to send me home, and they didn't. But then I had to go back to camp. After having tried to, first of all, said to this guy, I wasn't going to tell. Then I not only told, but was trying to get him voted off. I had to live with him for 3 more days, because I figured 3 days was it, because the next tribal council, I would certainly be gone. And I came back to the island after tribal council, and one of my other, my friends, put his arm around me and said, "How you doing, Lisa?" And I said, not good at all. And he said, "Well, what's the matter?" I said, I feel terrible, I'm so sorry I did that. It just feels awful. I don't want to play this game, I don't like this game, I want to go home. And Malcolm came up to me, he said, "Mama, come here. It's just a game. You were playing the game. You were playing the game well. Not good enough, thankfully. But you were playing the game," and he embraced me with this grace. And I didn't deserve it. I was trying to get rid of him. But I felt it, and I felt it just in my very bones and in my body. And that is what I want for you. I want you to, I'm not saying I want you to fall, but there's a part of it that's so saying I want you to fall. Because there's really no losing here. This is a win-win situation. Either you stay in the boundaries of the law, and they are there for a reason. They do protect us. There is wisdom in following the law. Absolutely. Do it. But I'm not going to say if you fall, when you fall, that's good too. Because that's when you actually can then receive the grace if you allow it. If you take a moment, and in that moment, rather than hurry up and promise you'll never do that again and figure out a plan that you're going to do better and get your accountability partners in place or deny or whatever you have to do to not feel this, for a moment, feel the failure and then feel the grace. You got to choose to, though. Imagine that Jesus is saying, "Come on, you're human. I knew you were human when I created you. It's okay." And let him embrace you with that grace so that it goes from your head down into your toes. And then I want you to throw your hands up in the air and dance in the fields of grace. Maybe let all the blood rush down into your legs, get out of your head and into your heart and into your body. And then if you fall hard, laugh it off, let your friends come around you, pick you up, and then dance some more, and maybe even move like Jagger.
So much, Lisa. I told her I am not dancing when that song plays in the service. Lisa, thank you so much for your transparency and for opening up your story in a way that is freeing for us. Thank you so much. Isn't it so refreshing to have a celebrity do that? We appreciate that so much. Thank you.